What's going on, party people? Day 6, Luke chapter 6. Welcome back to Advent-Ageous reading. Ain't no sense in wasting any time. Let's just hop right into it. Thank you for coming back. Let's go. While he was going through a field of grain on a Sabbath, his disciples were picking the heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands, and eating them. Some Pharisees said, "Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus said to them in reply, "Have you not read what David did when he and those who were with him were hungry? How he went into the house of God, took the bread of offering, which only the priests could lawfully eat, ate of it, and shared it with his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.' On another Sabbath he went into the synagogue and taught, and there was a man there whose right hand was withered. The scribes and the Pharisees watched him closely to see if he would cure on the Sabbath, so that they might discover a reason to accuse him. But he realized their intentions and said to the man with the withered hand, 'Come up and stand before us.' And he rose and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, 'I ask you, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath rather than to do evil, to save life rather than to destroy it?' Looking around at them all, he then said to him, 'Stretch out your hand.' He did so, and his hand was restored. But they became enraged and discussed together what they might do to Jesus. In those days he departed to the mountain to pray, and he spent the night in prayer to God. When day came, he called his disciples to himself, and from them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles: Simon, whom he named Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Simon, who was called a Zealot, and Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. And he came down with them and stood on a stretch of level ground. A great crowd of his disciples and a large number of the people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And even those who were tormented by unclean spirits were cured. Everyone in the crowd sought to touch him, because power came forth from him and healed them all. And raising his eyes toward his disciples, he said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for the kingdom of God is yours. Blessed are you who are now hungry, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who are now weeping, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude and insult you, and denounce your name as evil on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice and leap for joy on that day. Behold, your reward will be great in heaven, for their ancestors treated the prophets in the same way. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. But woe to you who are filled now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will grieve and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for their ancestors treated the false prophets in this way. But to you who hear I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. To the person who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other one as well. And from the person who takes your cloak, do not withhold even your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from the one who takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. If you lend money to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But rather, love your enemies and do good to them, and lend expecting nothing back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. For he himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as also your Father is merciful. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and gifts will be given to you. A good measure, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing, will be poured into your lap. For the measure with which you measure will in return be measured out to you." And he told them a parable. "Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? No disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother, 'Brother, let me remove that splinter in your eye,' when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own eye? You hypocrite! Remove the wooden beam from your eye first. Then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. A good tree does not bear rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit. For every tree is known by its fruit. For people do not pick figs from thorn bushes, nor do they gather grapes from brambles. A good person out of the store of goodness in his heart produces good, but an evil person out of a store of evil produces evil. For from the fullness of the heart the mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, but do not do what I command? I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, listens to my words, and acts on them. That one is like a person building a house, who dug deeply and laid the foundation on rock. When the flood came, the river burst against that house, but could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who listens and does not act is like a person who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the river burst against it, it collapsed at once and was completely destroyed. Lord God, come to you in thanksgiving once again for the gift of sacred scripture. Thank you for revealing the word to us. Thank you for your life here on earth, that you lived among us, where you preached the truth and the gospel message to the entire world as your intention. Lord, thank you for all of the men and women that you have called since then to be part of the evangelization of the entire world. Be with us always, and let these words last forever. Amen. Wow. So we have a lot to unpack in chapter 6. Starting off a smaller bit is the debates about the Sabbath that happen the first couple paragraphs. And what Jesus is really talking about here, at least this is the way that I'm seeing it, and this is the way that I think is the right way to look at it, is that we're talking about the distinction between the law of rest and the spirit of rest. What is the Sabbath for? And the answer to that is rest. And what is rest? What does that look like? What is giving the Lord his day? Giving the Lord what is due him. That time in worship for Christians on Sunday. What does that look like for us? We have a lot of debates with our students about what that should look like, especially in their lives. I as a student, I kind of had to look at this being in school. How do I want to tackle the idea of rest? Because the big debate comes down to when should I do my homework is really the thing. So, and what we've kind of have really tried to hammer into people is like, look, if God is specifically giving us Sunday for rest, to go to Mass, to celebrate the resurrection, the recreation of the world, like, if that's what it's to celebrate, that's the day that we're celebrating it. That's the day that we're giving to the Lord. For us to say, you know what, I'm going to goof off Monday through Saturday, and especially I'm going to be, hanging out with friends and partying late at night, Friday and Saturday night, and then I'm going to cram all my homework in on Sunday and maybe barely make it to Sunday Mass at some point in the day. Are we really giving the Lord his due? Funny enough, I remember I heard a Protestant influencer one time by the name of Redeemed Zoomer. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of him, but I thought that this was a very good point that he made, was that working on a Sunday unnecessarily and without a just reason, so just doing it for the sake of doing it, when you could have genuinely done it at a different time, doing that work on Sunday is actually an indicator of sloth, which sounds crazy because it's like, how am I being slothful if I am not, if I'm working, if I'm not just being a lazy bones? Because you're doing the work when it's not supposed to be done, the day that the Lord has set apart for us to especially be in worship of Him. And that to say, oh yeah, Friday and Saturday, I couldn't do that work. I had to, goof off and hang out with my friends, and I'm gonna go out to the bars until 1 a.m. and I'm gonna, watch YouTube videos all night. Like, come on, man. Like, are we being for real? That's kind of my 2 cents about it. And it's like, genuinely, like, we've had so many debates with the students. Any of us who've been in leadership at some point, whether as a student leader or as a missionary, whatever it is, like, it's not that difficult, is my honest opinion. It is not that difficult to plan around what the church has prescribed for us. The church's standards for worship are, I shouldn't say this. The church's precepts for what constitutes a practicing Catholic, I would argue, are quite lenient and not the hardest thing in the world to say, like, yeah, I can check off these boxes. Like, yeah. So we just have a lot of discussions about that, and like, what is the true spirit of rest? Now, obviously, we run into different situations, and you look at what the church has taught about this issue, what the Catechism says are just reasons, when it comes to family or legitimate societal needs. Like, in my experience, I've been in the Army Reserve my entire time that I've been in college. Since I got out of high school, I've been in the Army Reserve. And so, yeah, part of my schedule, sometimes working on behalf of the government for the broader society, is being a weekend warrior, that one weekend a month, that one Sunday a month that I end up also working. Which, yeah, the church, it would fall under it being like a just reason for the needs of, the community, the society. And obviously, you have legitimate family obligations that sometimes you need to adhere to, right? Like, yeah, it's about the spirit of rest. Am I actually giving the Lord His due? And I think that's what everybody should approach it as. It should never be, oh yeah, I'm doing enough, so like I can just work all day Sunday and party on Friday and Saturday. It's like, I don't know about that. So I know I've talked ad nauseum about this, and I said it was going to be a short point. So I just want to make sure I move on. But yeah, like Jesus even says in verse 9, like it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So to do good works is also not like it's not a negative point against you too. Like, dude, cook lunch. I don't know. Do something good. So yeah, let's move on from that point. So now we're moving on to Luke's account of what it calls in this gospel the Sermon on the Plain. You probably know the more popular rendition, the Sermon on the Mount, found in the Gospel of Matthew. And I want to talk about here what the Beatitudes are really centered around, what I'll call the attitude of the Beatitudes. Point that really sticks out to me is a line from Psalm 126, the line that those who sow in tears will reap with cries of joy. Other translations will say those who sow in tears will reap rejoicing. I like that translation better. This is just what my translation has. Psalm 126, that's verse 5. I remember the first time I heard that, funny enough, was at an Army training event, where it was a 5-week training event. We didn't have a lot of opportunities to go to Mass. And I just remember being really upset about that because I was used to, going to Mass almost every day. Things are great. I was going to church, just had a really great relationship with God. And I felt like, through no fault of my own, that I wasn't able to go to Mass. I felt that I was not giving the Lord His due. And that even though I understood that it wasn't necessarily something that could be realistically or logistically accommodated to say like, oh yeah, we'll in this really important, dense 5-week training, we're going to try and get you Mass every day. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. I knew that going into it. But yeah, one of the lines that really, the one day that I did get to go to daily mass, one of them, that was the psalm that day. Those who sow in tears will reap rejoicing. And I just remember that kind of really getting to the heart of where I was emotionally at the time. Like, I am sowing in tears right now. I'm upset that my spiritual interior life is not what it could be, but I also recognize that at the time I was doing a necessary training to advance my position in the military so that I could achieve my next goal with that, which is not necessarily a bad thing, obviously, like to be providing a genuine public service. And I know I'm not the most, I don't want to necessarily go around and say, oh, go please thank me for my service. Like, I honestly kind of cringe sometimes when people thank me for my service, because I look at the past couple years I've been in the Army and I'm like, I'm not like anything crazy. I haven't done any crazy stuff. I've never been deployed, never been in a combat situation. I've never had my life at risk. I've gone through the necessary trainings to have the title of soldier, and that's pretty much, and I've done some other stuff too, but like, that's pretty much it. So I don't want to ever look at that and say, oh, woe is me, I have it the worst of everybody. Because I know the stories. I've talked to some of the Army chaplains. I know the stories of the people who they're on these long-term deployments and they say, hey, it's been a year since we've seen a priest. I'm like, I will fully acknowledge it could be a whole lot worse. But when I read the Beatitudes and when I think about that psalm, I'm thinking about just that attitude of like, something is not right. Right. And obviously, like in a perfect world, where no one was sinning and everyone wanted to do what was right. Like, yeah, everyone would be Catholic and there's priests everywhere and, mass is available every day, even when you are in those rigorous training environments. It's like, yeah, we're going to have mass every day. Of course we are. Everybody's Catholic. Everybody wants to have mass. And when I'm sitting there as like the only guy that wants that, it's like, I'm sowing in tears. And I can relate, not necessarily, it's not a perfect one-to-one, because obviously the people that Jesus is speaking to in his sermon are in a much different situation than I am in good old 21st century America. But there's still some kind of connection there of something isn't right. Like, what Jesus is appealing to here is like, hey, there's all those people that they go around making a big pomp and circumstance about how, look how holy I am, I'm amazing, look at me, I give a couple pieces of grain in donation, and I wear these fancy clothes, and I'm rich, and God clearly must love me, right? And what Jesus is speaking to there is this acknowledgement that like something's wrong. The way I can relate to that in ways I've seen it in my life, like, is in that situation with, like I said, in the training, it's like, yeah, a lot of people, even the ones who are Catholic, like, didn't really care. They're like, oh, there's no mass. Oh, well, I'm just going to go hang out and have a good time, whatever. I don't need to read my Bible. And that's not to say that was every single person there. Absolutely not. There were some very great people there who were strong in their faith. Some people who maybe didn't have a faith upbringing at all, that I don't fault anybody for that. But yeah, like I'm recognizing there's something wrong, and other people are just kind of, it's on the back burner for them. Like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, I'm sure I'm fine. I'm sure I'm a good person anyway. I'm sure I don't even need to go to mass. I'm sure I don't even need this Jesus guy. Like, who cares, man? Like, yeah, maybe he was a nice teacher like 2,000 years ago. Whatever. I don't really want to think about this any harder. And I don't say that like to condemn anybody. I say that just to state a fact that a lot of people simply do not think about the implications of what this looks like. And so when Jesus is talking in the sermon, he's like, blessed are the poor, blessed are those who, are hungry, you'll be satisfied. Blessed are those who are weeping, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you. Like, this is totally upside down. He says, woe to those who basically have everything now. Because for the people who have everything and don't steward it right, they're not going to be rewarded for that. Like, what Jesus is saying is that, like, everything's going to be evened out. Like, those who are empty will have their fill, and those who are full will be empty. Like, it's such like to the people at the time, it's such a upside down, backwards way of what things look like to the naked eye. But yeah, every teaching that's really in this sermon is extremely hard. And that's just one of them. We've spent the last 6 minutes just talking about like a paragraph and a half. Like, there's so much to unpack here. But what I really want to get to is some of the very hard teachings that come right after this. And I want to also talk about kind of two extremes that people find themselves in when looking at these teachings. Some people, they hear lines like, oh, love your enemies, love your neighbor, love this, love that. And what they think love is a one-to-one love equals tolerance, basically. And tolerance is like, everything is permissible. Which is not what this is saying at all. You frequently hear that when any kind of moral issue is brought up. Oh, but I thought it was love your neighbor. I thought it was love your neighbor. And yes, it is. Guess what? It is love your neighbor. But what is love? In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1766, Catholic Church defines love as willing the good of another. So wanting what's good for them. And a lot of people will also add on the clause of for that person's sake. For their sake. Not for your own benefit. Selflessly, fully willing the good of somebody else for them. Seeking no benefit for yourself. So yeah. That being said, if that's love, if love is wanting what's best for somebody, does loving your neighbor mean I'm going to act in a way that seems as if I endorse every single thing they do? No. Like, you shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't ever cave on morality. That's one end of it. Is that like, oh yeah, like everything's permissive. I'm a pushover. And basically all of your relationships at that point are codependent. It's like, oh, I'm going to try, but like, I don't really need anyone else to, I'm not going to call anybody higher, or I'm never going to, which like, yes, obviously when you read the gospel, sometimes I'm not going to try and contradict Jesus here. Yes, a plain-faced reading of this, somebody might come out of it and say like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be a pushover. I'm supposed to let people walk all over me. I'm supposed to do this. Like, no, you're supposed to fight for justice, but you are supposed to do so joyfully. Not holding a grudge, but like knowing in your heart and your mind what is correct, what is right, what is just. Knowing what's true. Not thinking that, oh, well, like, I guess it's like a good thing that I'm being pushed around. Like, that's not what's a good thing. What's a good thing is your ability to, one, willingly accept suffering joyfully, and two, to be able to have that moral compass, have that judgment, have that ability, that moral authority to call people higher in your life. So that's one end of the spectrum of the extreme way to get this wrong is like, I'm a pushover, I'm codependent. The other extreme is to just completely ignore what this says at all and be like, some people, they hear the whole heaven and hell thing, they hear the previous reading about, oh yeah, everything will be evened out, like the poor will be made richer, the richer will be made poorer, is like what they hear in plain face. And so they think, yeah, cool, all right, so like all my enemies are going to hell, this is great, like I'm justified. And that's, sadly, I'll admit, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, that's how I used to view things when I was first trying to become a Christian. I would say, well, all the people who've wronged me in my life, clearly they're going to hell. So I just don't even need to worry about it. Which is also absolutely the wrong way to look at it. Because, like, should I be rejoicing over the fact that souls are falling into hell like snowflakes? No, absolutely not. And people, they either, like I said, the two extremes. There's either a permissiveness of, oh, I'm a pushover, I'm codependent, I just let everybody do what they want, I never say anything to anyone about anything because, I just don't want to be judgmental, I want to be a false version of charitable. And then the other version is, my false version of being charitable is just to tell everyone that they're going to hell because, everything will be made even. And so, like, everyone who's wronged me, like, clearly they're bad and they're in the wrong. Completely ignoring the fact that you are, unless you're like, I don't know, Jesus or Mary, like you are very likely a sinner yourself and have probably done some horrible things in your life, things that you either have had to or probably still need to repent of yourself to the Lord and really express your sorrow. And I'm not saying you as in you and not me. Me too. I am not a perfect person. So, why would we ever rejoice over the idea of people going to hell? We should be praying for them. Always. Yeah. There's that line some people like to use, the idea of like praying on someone's downfall, or a lot of Christians will even fall into this trap of believing in things like karma. And it's like, we don't believe that. We don't believe that, like, oh, like it's a perfect 1-to-1 ratio. Like every good thing you do in your life will be rewarded. Every bad thing you do in your life will be punished, like, immediately. Like, that is the wrong way of looking at things. We don't believe in karma. We don't believe in reincarnation. We don't believe in any of that crap. You're not, like, the reason you're suffering right now is not because you had a bad life 5,000 years ago and now you got to suffer for it in this body. Like, we don't believe in that crap. Like, we believe that you are one person and you are going to receive what is just from the Lord. And yeah, that's where I'll kind of end that point there. And what do we have after this? A tree known by its fruit. This is a good way of discerning, I would say, am I falling into one of those two traps? Either the codependency or the, oh, I'm perfect and everyone else is going to hell. To prevent yourself from falling into those extremes. And that's to really, like, think about this. It's like a tree is known by its fruit. And what I want to appeal to here is St. Paul in Galatians 5:22. Everyone's probably heard this one before, the fruits of the Spirit. What are the fruits of the Spirit? Let's think about them. Let me see if I can get them from memory here real quick while I'm recording. Okay, we got love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I think that's all of them. I think. I'll fact check it later. Maybe you guys can fact check me. But I'm pretty sure I got them all. Where I remember that there's like this song that my buddy Darren used to show me. It's like, I'm talking about love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Better check their fruits. Hopefully that does not get copyrighted now. But anyway, it's a very good song. I think it's called Check Their Fruits or something. I forget who the artist is, but very good R&B song. He's like, Galatians 5:22, you better check their fruits. Very good song. So you should totally listen to it. It's lit. But yeah, I would say use Galatians chapter 5 definitely as a discernment, an examination of your conscience. Like, am I really, what do I see in my life? Am I seeing the fruits of the Spirit, or am I seeing, like, my fleshly desires come out and take hold and manifest in the way that I behave in life? So, tree is known by its fruit. If you're a bad tree, you are not going to produce good fruit. So, it's kind of like what we were talking about with the wineskins beforehand. Like, hey man, don't be an old wineskin, and don't be a bad tree. Last thing I want to talk about here, the idea of what is your foundation, right? So Jesus talks about, somebody who lays a foundation on rock and someone who has a weak foundation, right? There's a interesting model we have for this in the apostolate I work for, Focus, Fellowship of Catholic University students. This concept called RIM, which is, again, people ask, why is it RIM? Why does it have to be these three words? It's just a nice fancy way of understanding something in 21st century English to communicate a concept that is literally like being communicated in this passage right here, right? The idea of rim is that it's like, what is the properly ordered person doing? So R standing for what is your relationship with God, I is what is your identity, and M is what is your mission. And what we kind of say, like, what you can say is here in the passage about the two foundations, what you can even see in, there's this writing called the Didache, which is basically the first century catechism, like from the apostles and their successors, like what they taught that Christians, how they should be living their lives. They have it's called the two ways, the way of life and the way of death. And ultimately, like what it comes down to is still like we come back to this concept of like you have the rim, the relationship, the identity, and the mission. You're going to have two ordered ways of living your life, either rim or backwards would be mer. Now, what are those two things meaning? Basically, it's saying like where do you start with, and then what logically flows from that. So if I'm in rim, what is my relationship with God? Well, we've already established, like, I'm God's son. And if you're a woman, you're God's daughter, all right? Either way, you're God's child, right? We talk about being made in the image and likeness of God. We talk about being a descendant of Adam, who is called son of God as well. Like in this very gospel we read, like, you are God's child. You're God's son. You're God's daughter, whatever is applicable to you, right? So if that's your relationship with God, if God is your father, then if God is your father, really is where we're starting with, then your identity is that you are his son or his daughter. And your mission should flow from that. It's like, God is my father, therefore I am God's son, therefore he's the center of my life, I do whatever he tells me. And then I base my life around him. Whereas you flip it, mission. Start with my mission. I start with the things that I do. What do I do? Well, I'm a student. I'm a soldier. I'm in politics. I'm a missionary even. Like, I'm whatever. I'm that thing. Is my mission. Those are the things I do. So if my identity flows from that, then I'm just a person who does those things. I just am those titles. So if my mission is being a soldier or a politician or whatever, then like that's my identity, is I'm a soldier, I'm a politician, and that's it. My relationship with God is he gets my leftovers. So it's the concept, the idea of like, are you giving your first fruits or are you giving your leftovers? Like, what is it that we're giving up here? So I invite us all to take that idea to prayer. Like, how am I ordering my life? The question that is trying to answer really is, who am I? And it's either you are the things you do, like you are the things you do, or you are God's son or God's daughter. So ask yourself, like, what's my relationship with God? What does that make me? And what should logically flow from that? Obviously, all of us are called to a different vocation. Vocation literally just means calling anyway. So it's like it's funny we say called to a vocation, called to a calling. Yeah, all of us have a different vocation in life. Our primary vocation is holiness. And then our secondary vocation would be the state of life that we're called to live in. Some of us, it's, married. Some people, it's being a priest. Some people, it's just being a celibate lay person. Some people, it's religious life. Whatever it is, that's what we have to be thinking about. All right. Is I'm called to holiness. And then how does God want me to express that holiness? What state of life is he calling me to? So, wow, we have talked about a lot today. This is going to be the longest episode thus far. But I'm excited to keep sharing this with y'all. I appreciate some of the feedback I've gotten from people. And I'm happy to continue doing this because I think that this is, it's very important. The gospel is so important to be sharing with people. And I'm really happy that you're joining along. I'm really happy that you're listening. I'm happy that you found yourself here today. Thank you for your support. I hope you have a good day. God bless.